Behind the glittering facade of designer gowns and million-dollar jewels lies one of the most controversial royal families in the world, and at the center of this opulent drama stands Princess Anisha, a woman whose every public appearance ignites debate about wealth, power, and the price of marrying into absolute monarchy. When she stepped out recently draped in haute couture that could fund a small nation's healthcare system, the world couldn't look away, and the questions that followed cut deeper than any fashion critique ever could. This is the story of a princess caught between luxury and legacy, between personal expression and political reality, and between the glittering spotlight and the long shadow of one of the world's most iron-fisted rulers. The Sultanate of Brunei exists as something of an anomaly in our modern world, a tiny oil-rich nation on the island of Borneo where medieval absolute monarchy collides head-on with 21st-century wealth beyond most people's wildest imagination. Sultan Hassan al-Bolkiah doesn't just rule Brunei, he owns it in ways that make other monarchs look like constitutional figureheads playing dress-up. We're talking about a man whose personal fortune has been estimated at over $20 billion, whose car collection alone includes thousands of vehicles worth hundreds of millions, whose palace contains nearly 2,000 rooms dripping with gold leaf and Italian marble, and whose word is quite literally law in every sense of that phrase. This isn't symbolic power or ceremonial authority. This is absolute control over a nation of fewer than 500,000 people sitting atop some of the richest oil and gas reserves in Southeast Asia. Into this world of unimaginable wealth and unchecked power came Princess Anisha, whose marriage into the Brunei royal family placed her directly in the orbit of a sultan whose reputation extends far beyond his material excess. This is a ruler who has implemented some of the harshest interpretations of Sharia law anywhere on earth. Legislation that sparked international outrage and calls for boycotts of Brunei-owned properties worldwide, including the Beverly Hills Hotel and the Dorchester in London. We're talking about laws that prescribe death by stoning for same-sex relationships and adultery, amputation for theft, and punishments that human rights organizations worldwide have condemned as medieval torture dressed up in legal language. The Sultan has defended these measures as expressions of Islamic values and sovereignty, but critics see something darker, a desperate grasp at religious legitimacy by a ruler whose own lifestyle and that of his family stands in stark contradiction to the austere morality he attempts to legislate for his subjects. And this brings us back to Princess Anisha and those haute couture gowns that set social media ablaze. When she appears at state functions and official events wearing creations from the world's most exclusive fashion houses, outfits that cost more than most Bruneians earn in years or even decades, the cognitive dissonance becomes impossible to ignore. Here is a woman adorned in the absolute pinnacle of Western luxury fashion, every stitch a testament to excess and extravagance, representing a family and a regime that simultaneously preaches strict Islamic values and traditional modesty. The contradiction isn't just visual, it's ideological, and it raises uncomfortable questions about authenticity, hypocrisy, and the nature of power in a nation where dissent can be dangerous and criticism of the royal family essentially forbidden. Fashion has always been political, but in Brunei it becomes something more complex and fraught. Princess Anisha's wardrobe choices aren't just about personal style or keeping up with international royal standards, they're statements whether she intends them to be or not. Each appearance in European haute couture sends ripples through a society where ordinary citizens, especially women, face strict expectations about dress and behavior, where the interpretation of Islamic law shapes daily life in ways that can feel suffocating to those who don't share the Sultan's vision. The disconnect between royal privilege and public prescription creates a two-tiered reality that many Bruneians navigate in silence, because speaking out against the Sultan or his family can carry serious consequences in a nation where political opposition barely exists and press freedom is essentially non-existent. The Sultan's own history adds another layer to this complicated portrait. This is a man who was once married to a former Royal Brunei Airlines flight attendant in a union that ended in scandal and international headlines when she fled the country with their children, later making allegations about life inside the palace that painted a picture far removed from fairy tale royalty. The Sultan's brother, Prince Geoffrey, became infamous for his own spectacular financial scandals involving billions in missing state funds, harems, and a lifestyle so excessive it made international news and spawned lawsuits across multiple continents. This is the family into which Princess Anisha married, A dynasty where unlimited wealth meets absolute power, with results that have been both dazzling and deeply disturbing depending on where you stand and whether you have the freedom to say what you really think. What makes Princess Anisha's position particularly fascinating is the performance it requires. She must embody royal glamour and international sophistication while representing a regime that many in the West view with horror. She must wear clothes that celebrate individual expression and artistic freedom while supporting a system that dramatically limits both for ordinary citizens. She must smile for cameras and attend state functions while the Sultanate her family rules faces ongoing criticism from human rights organizations, international governments, and activists worldwide who see Brunei's legal system as fundamentally incompatible with basic human dignity. The emotional and psychological cost of maintaining this balance rarely gets discussed in the breathless fashion coverage or the gossip about royal jewels, but it's there beneath every public appearance and every carefully staged photograph. The wealth that makes Princess Anisha's haute couture possible flows from oil and gas reserves that have made the Sultan's family unimaginably rich while creating a strange kind of welfare state where citizens pay no income tax and receive free education and healthcare. A social contract that essentially exchanges political freedom for material comfort. It's a bargain that works for some and feels like a gilded cage to others, particularly those whose identities or behaviors fall outside the increasingly narrow boundaries the Sultanate defines as acceptable. The Sultan positions himself as both benefactor and enforcer, providing for his people while demanding absolute obedience and conformity to his interpretation of how society should function. And there's something deeply paternalistic and ultimately troubling about that dynamic, no matter how many designer gowns get paraded at state dinners. When Princess Anisha steps out in her latest haute couture creation, she becomes a lightning rod for all these tensions and contradictions, a living embodiment of the gaps between image and reality, between wealth and justice, between tradition and modernity, between public morality and private excess. She didn't create these contradictions, she married into them, but now she must navigate them every single day under the watchful eyes of both her adopted nation and an international audience that judges her choices through vastly different cultural and political lenses. Some see her fashion as frivolous distraction from serious human rights concerns, others view it as soft power and cultural diplomacy, still others read it as silent rebellion or the only form of self-expression available to a woman in her position. The truth probably contains elements of all these interpretations, because people are complex and situations involving absolute monarchy and billions of dollars are never simple no matter how much we might want them to be. The future of Brunei remains uncertain in many ways. Oil wealth won't last forever, and the Sultanate will eventually need to diversify its economy and potentially its political structures to survive in a changing world. Whether Princess Anisha and the generation she represents will be agents of gradual reform or defenders of the status quo remains to be seen. But her visibility and her choices, including those haute couture gowns, make her someone worth watching and worth thinking critically about. She represents something larger than herself, a collision of worlds and values that defines not just Brunei but many societies struggling to reconcile traditional authority with modern expectations, religious law with universal human rights, concentrated wealth with widespread well-being, and the prerogatives of power with the demands of justice. So the next time you see Princess Anisha in another stunning designer creation, look beyond the surface glamour and ask yourself what that image really represents, what it conceals, and what it might tell us about power, privilege, and the price people pay, seen and unseen, for life inside one of the world's most closed and controlled societies. Before you go, I want to hear from you in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe to this channel for more deep dives into the hidden stories behind the headlines. Hit that share button if you found this valuable, and drop a comment with your thoughts because your perspective matters. Here's the question that lingers after all this analysis and all these revelations about wealth and power and the contradictions of absolute monarchy. If you were in Princess Anisha's position, would you use your platform and visibility to quietly push for change from within? Or would the risks and constraints of life inside a sultanate make even the attempt at reform feel impossible and dangerous?